All right, on this episode of Bowks Talking Bouts, talking to an individual who's readying for quite the big title defense. We've got the AEW TNT champion, also the ROH TV champion, but readying to defend that TNT title against Wardlow at AEW Revolution, which goes this coming Sunday, and happy to have Samoa Joe on the show to talk a bit about that. How's your day going so far, man?
It's pretty great. It's pretty great. Being the one true king of television, my days managed to be a little bit brighter each and every day. So, today was definitely one of them.
Yeah, and I mean, your resume is, quite stunning with just the amount of, Leviathan heavyweight kind of characters you've clashed with. I mean, names like Lesnar, Kobashi, Misawa, I could really go on, but I'm just kind of curious, like, what attributes Wardlow brings to the table that might, differentiate him from some of the aforementioned, like, Titanic, like, heavyweights you've collided with.
I mean, I think that his biggest advantage is probably the enthusiasm. But, like most things, it's both a gift and a curse. And I think an athlete like Wardlow, obviously, a tremendous physical specimen, a guy who definitely outputs a lot more power than you think that frame could. I'd liken him to a tugboat as far as being all engine in that chassis. So just a lot of physicality, man. He's a tough dude to deal with, and he's a big, strong guy. And I think you look up and down the line of some of the people that you mentioned there, you'll see a lot of parallels.
Yeah, for sure. And something I really like about this matchup too is, I mean, it seems like the bad blood has kind of reached a boil here. Like Wardlow and yourself have both, articulated to each other very much that across a series of, very memorable promos. So I guess, can you speak to that confluence of this being a very, physically intriguing match, but both of you like really getting out those like captivating interviews before and adding a lot of, I guess, additional context to this big title match you guys have?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we are at a boiling point. I mean, that's purposeful. I'm glad we are. That's the way I like things to be. When you see me show up on your television screen, I'm out there to pick a fight. Not to sing, dance, and entertain. So, that to me is kind of the essence of what I look for and what I think a lot of fans look for is they want two guys who really don't like each other. They want to find out what's what at the end of the night. And, that very much is, the vibe me and Wardlow have going right now. I'm completely content with that.
Yeah, for sure. And this is just such an interesting time for you. Like, I've followed your career for, a good while now, but it just seems like there's so many interesting dynamics to this current AEW run, just in terms of, like, I guess some of the contemporaries from, like, the early days that are, kind of still around and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I saw you beat Excalibur circa January 2000, so, I mean, he's doing the commentary now. Obviously, a lot of guys still out there wrestling and everything. Can you, I guess, speak to what it was like kind of being interwoven into that AEW fold? Because it seems like very much one of those things where, as much as it is a new thing, it bears certain, hallmarks and similarities to, like, that early, I guess, 2000s indie scene. Can you maybe talk about that there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's my whole career has been a discovering new familiarity. I like to call it, because everywhere I go, I see a lot of the same faces, a lot of the same people, whether it be in ROH to TNA to WWE and now here in AEW. And that's not by accident. When you keep looking around and seeing the same people in the locker rooms year after year, usually they're some of the best that the world has ever produced. So, it is very interesting because obviously it's very cool to have had your journey and have gone where you've gone, and then to be able to circle back around and see people, and now they're out there and they're flourishing in the world, and they're on their way. And I mean, coming back to AEW was a lot of those type of reunions. So it was for me personally, just from a career standpoint, it's very cool to be able to revisit people and see them at their best.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that seems to come through with AEW, but I mean, especially so with Ring of Honor, just the lineage you have with those guys being the longest reigning champion across a singular reign, and being a Hall of Famer there and stuff like that. And I was enjoying an interview I saw where you were talking about Ring of Honor existing as more of like a fluid concept, like in as far as it's like a platform for the guys that are getting that big buzz on the indies, and they can start really getting that certain level of, I guess, compounded attention thereafter. Like, I guess, can you speak to this latest permutation of Ring of Honor and what your thoughts are on it, considering the legacy?
I'm very much hoping it's a continuation of that. Ring of Honor, when it's at its best, in my opinion, was when it became a platform for young and up and coming talent to establish themselves, to kind of grow a fan base and develop into some of the best stars that we see in the industry across the board. And I'd love to see it take on some of that once again, because at the time it made it a really great place to work. Everybody was hungry. Everybody was doing their best to set the world on fire. And that kind of attitude never hurts a company nor its product. So recapturing that is definitely a goal I hope gets accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, so many great memories, even for me. Like, I mean, that, CZW versus Ring of Honor feud is just one of the, greatest kind of feuds in that sense. Like, especially in, like, that, like, cross-promotional, like, dynamic there. Like, that was just, so great. Just seeing how that all capped off with, like, the Cage of Death and everything like that. So, yeah, a wealth of great memories, and seems like there's a lot more to come as well.
Well, hopefully. I mean, that's what we're still out here getting down for.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm kind of curious because, like, I kind of, put out to my social media followers, like, see if they wanted to ask you some questions and whatnot. And one of my, followers, Manny David, was kind of wondering if there were certain venues you were, I guess, like, partial to performing in, or even cities, because kind of in doing my research on you, like, just as an example, closer to my neck of the woods, it would seem like Toronto would be a place you enjoy performing and have had, historically great, success there. But is there a certain venue or city that you're, I guess, especially partial to, or not so much?
I mean, at this point, I've been fortunate enough in my career to, perform in a lot of really awesome venues. So, I mean, I could never pick one, probably a short list. But I mean, specifically maybe to Ring of Honor, I think the Rexplex is kind of a special place, no longer there anymore, I know, but was kind of a wild environment. I remember a lot of great memories there. And I think, looking back, obviously, the New Yorker and the Hammerstein, those two venues were always super hot and were kind of like, apex venues for ROH. But I think for me personally, just for the sheer sadism and it kind of spoke to like how gangster the fan base was back then. If you sat in that Murphy Rec Center in the summer and you sat through that whole show and sweated with us because it was 1,000,000 degrees and there was no AC, hot, muggy, Philly summer. If you were at those shows, it's a different environment because there's an aspect of torture to it, as well as fandom. So, how live they were, and to sit through some of those shows, that kind of always reflects in my life.
Yeah, it's like there's this weird camaraderie between the fans and the wrestlers of being just, like, stiflingly hot and sweaty. Like, even like someone who's been in the crowd.
Like, if you told your best buddy, hey, we're going to go to a wrestling show, but they're going to hold it in a sauna, which was essentially what it was. The fact that they would show up for a second, third, fourth show spoke to how intensely loyal the fan base was.
Yeah, well, I'm out here in Oshawa, Ontario, and there's been like a few occasions where I've gone to wrestling shows with buddies, and it just gets to a point with some of them where, like, man, I'm tapping out. I gotta go outside for a bit at least.
Yeah, it can be let me tell you, being an indie wrestling fan can take you some crazy venues and some very, very uncomfortable buildings, both in the summer and the winter.
But I actually, in mentioning Oshawa, I met you years ago at the Oshawa Legion Hall, and you signed my, TNA Samoa Joe DVD at the time. What memories, if at all, do you have of, like, any of the, I guess, past appearances you've had in, my hometown there? Because I was noticing you've had, like, a few matches over the years with, like, Raven and, like, some TNA house shows over the years and all that.
I mean, obviously, like, anytime we got up to Canada, people turned out, and it was a blast. Canadian wrestling fans are very passionate and almost like craft beer like in their obsession with wrestling. So everybody has a very strong opinion and varied opinions too. So it's always fun. You know what I mean? Like I always find that whenever we did the loops and we would sweep up through Canada, it was always a good time because everybody kind of showed up to have a good time. So it wasn't like they were showing up and like somebody impressed me. It was like, we're here to party and to cheer the bad guys and boo the people we hate and have a few drinks along the way. So it's just always a general good vibe anytime we come up.
Yeah, well, glad to hear you've had enjoyable experiences in Canada. I know Canada loves having some Samoa Joe, but I'm curious because, like, obviously there's great, Samoan representation in pro wrestling, and understandably that seems like an important thing to you, but you also seem like a guy that, follows combat sports, and obviously some pretty prominent Samoans in combat sports over the years, like Mark Hunt, David Tua, even like Justin Tafa and his brother Junior Tafa nowadays in the UFC. Like, do you kind of follow that end of things, like in terms of the Samoan representation in, either boxing, MMA, etc.?
Absolutely. It's almost inescapable in the Samoan community because, somebody's auntie will bring it up. Oh, yeah, that's so-and-so's cousins. Oh, I know them. There's always a tale to be told about how there's a connection. But, and it's no surprise, I knew there was great fighters coming out of Hawaii and the West Coast for years now, and I think it's just indicative of a lot of athletes now coming out of New Zealand and Australia that they've got more of a pipeline to advance in the sport, whereas really didn't exist before. It was very regional and very much, hey, that's on the other side of the planet now. You're seeing the rise of New Zealand and Australian fighters, and there's large Polynesian communities in both these countries, so it really is no surprise. I guarantee you'll probably see even more and more Polynesians making the jump into MMA and or whatever realms will bring them to United States audiences.
Yeah, for sure. I figured you had a level of combat sports fandom when I was checking out that old like ROH shoot interview you were in back in the day where you had like the Anoki Boombaye 2003 shirt. Like I remember Fedor stopped Yuji Nagata on that card, and I was like, okay, I see you.
Yeah. Back then, was involved initially with the LA Dojo when it was an Oki Dojo, and had a pretty good, just even by force, just by the nature of my duties. You had to know what was going on in combat sports at all times.
But something I was noticing in doing my research on you, like I actually didn't know this prior to kind of getting in the, I guess, research cycle, but I was noticing you wrestled Gerard Gordeau for 0-1 years ago, and I'm quite curious about that experience. Like, can you give me some insights into that whole thing?
Oh, absolutely terrifying. Gerard Gordeau is probably one of the most serious individuals on planet Earth. Fortunately, Sensei Gordeau was a really awesome guy to tour with, and actually got to sit down and have a lot of really prospectively interesting conversations with him about various world events and how, it was eye-opening for me, especially as a young man, because, you're traveling internationally for the first time, and, you're kind of hearing all these crazy different points of view and seeing where they come from, where they originate from. But, the match in and of itself was very much like, Gerard Gordeau is not a man who pro wrestles, and he'll tell you that. I'm a Kyokushin black belt. I kickbox and I beat people up, and he throws his kicks, his punches. You do your best to stay in there and hopefully not miss any teeth when you're finished up there. So, but other than that, he's an awesome guy. Every time I come through to Holland or the Netherlands, he would be like, "Hey, come to Kamakura," and always an open invite, and interesting individual to say the least.
Yeah, well, it sounds like from what you're saying, he was just an interesting person to talk to on like a, articulate your worldview kind of level, but also interesting experiences. And as far as like, he was in the first UFC fight and just so many different Vale Tudo tournaments he was in. So yeah, I would think there'd be quite a few stories.
And a lot from the initial, he was there at the start of K1 and a few other, Lucha Libre programs. At the time, he had a few of his fighters fighters with them, and kind of, getting my first real experience with Dutch kickboxing and Dutch kickboxers and their mentality and their style of fighting. And, it really, for me as a martial artist, was very eye-opening, just spending, 3 or 4 weeks with those guys, kind of, learning their mindset and how they approached, what they did. And yeah, like I said, it's one of those rare experiences that you don't think you're going to find yourself in ever,
Yeah, and you always like blended that well. Like you always had like a very mixed martial arts informed kind of style, and I think at least domestically that really laid the groundwork for a lot of different people, or at the very least gave them something to, kind of think about too. Like when did you, I guess, initially, start training martial arts? And like, I mean, was the idea to always kind of interweave that into your style? Because it seems like that's the case.
I mean, I initially started judo as a kid, and that was kind of my main discipline. And then, getting into high school was just more about football and playing, traditional sports. And, kind of after that, I was looking for something just to kind of get back into. Jiu-jitsu was the new, hot thing, and, was the way. And I went to a jiu-jitsu studio, which actually had, it rented time to a pro wrestling studio. They're like 50-50 with the space. And, when I get to work out, stay after and do that. And, doing that, that's kind of got me into pro wrestling. And I just never looked back. But for the most part, that's it. Other than that, I box a little bit with my coach here and just, try to keep the wheels moving and make sure things look tight and well. And, I mean, that's essentially the extent of it.
Yeah, I feel like there'd be such a science to like, adhering to the technique and making it look clean, but being, I guess, relatively safe with the people you're working with. Like, is it like a sort of like, is there like a snugness to it? Like, is there almost a try to like meet it in the middle kind of thing? Or what's the, I guess, approach in that kind of sense?
I think it's kind of, it's technique based. It's understanding a technique so you can deconstruct it in the proper way and make the adjustments to it in the proper way. It's a lot of things, I really wish I could pin it down to a general mantra, but I mean, essentially it's just kind of, if you understand the form of something, you can, better replicate the form of something. So, I mean, that always has kind of been my mindset. So, really for me, it's been more about, I sitting down there and just breaking down the biomechanics of, why a flying knee looks so awesome, why this punch looks better than this punch, and how it comes in, angle, and, perception angle of where it hits the eye of the viewer. I mean, there's just a lot of different aspects that kind of go into it.
Yeah, I mean, even like a somewhat recent example, like yourself and Minoru Suzuki, like a guy who's obviously well-traveled as like a Pancrase veteran and very much an established pro wrestler. It's like I very much enjoy those kind of matches because there's a certain, appearance of stiffness and everything like that, and a certain very like physical kind of nature to it, but there's a certain like fluidity to it and like the technique you're talking about there. So yeah, very intriguing to see that kind of play out in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm just kind of curious because, I mean, you've had such a, lengthy resume. Obviously, I've outlined many of the different names across the resume. It seems like when you were leaving, your previous company, that like the only thing you were thinking was like, it would have been good to work with some of the younger talent and, kind of like help build them up in that kind of sense. And it seems like now you're working with like, Darby Allin. We're obviously talking about, this great Wardlow feud. Like, are you feeling you're, getting to do that now, like work with the young talent and build them up?
I think what I've really learned is if you're going to be in this industry actively, you're always going to be working with younger talent, and kind of how you deal with that is indicative of the legacy that you leave. So I'm just happy that I'm kind of being exposed to talent that I didn't have much background on or didn't know much on, and kind of being pleasantly surprised and the majority of those interactions. And so, it's been fun, man. It's been really, really cool. It's been somewhat of a realization of that. I just have kind of a different perspective on it.
And it seems like you also have a multitude of creative outlets that are, serving you well. Like, it seems like there's a lot of cool, like, voiceover projects going on. Like, when I saw you were involved in like the Twisted Metal cast. Like that got me fired up. Like that was like pretty prominent when I was a younger lad for sure. And I mean, still has prominence obviously by virtue of, this project going on. So, what's the excitement level with some of those different projects? Because I think it's cool you're, branching out more and doing that in recent years.
No, super high. I mean, I know from Twisted Metal, just, I think it's going to be a really fun show and, a nice, entertaining afternoon of television. I think, Suicide Squad, I mean, from what I've seen alone, and, I'm always anxious. I wish I could say more. I think it's going to be a blast too. And, I'm looking forward to seeing how both projects are received. I hope they kick ass and do awesome and people love them and are happy with them.
Yeah, I feel like if you were able to time travel and talk to your past self, I bet that version of Samoa Joe would be quite excited. Just the guy that, beat AJ Styles at Tekken 4 at, Vans Park 5 times. I think he'd be pretty elated, I'd imagine.
Yeah, he'd be pretty stoked about all this. Well, he would have kind of known it back then as he was beating AJ. Like there would have been a flash of brilliance. He would have been like, yes, the future. And then all this kind of would have floated by in a big like memory haze. So yeah, I mean, he might have already known back then. That was just the universe kind of reminded him.
And one thing I'm kind of curious about, because I was kind of rewatching some of your matches and it kind of harkened back to like a previous memory I had where I was showing an old roommate the Joe versus Kobashi match, and it was his first time seeing it and everything, and he was enjoying it. But then towards the end, he was like, man, like, he lost from a clothesline. And like, I went on the longest rant explaining the differences between a lariat and a clothesline. And I felt like such a nerd, but like in a good way, like a good pro wrestling nerd fandom type energy. Like, have you ever had a moment like that where you're like, damn, like, I really love this, but also a bit of a nerd?
I mean, as far as stuff I've done, or just in general?
Yeah, I mean, whichever, just in general. I suppose maybe it could even be, like, related to video game fandom or something of that persuasion. Just a moment where you're, like, I guess going on an impassioned rant about something, and it's like, damn, I really like this, but also maybe kind of a nerd a little bit.
Yeah, a little. My reasoning for, like, it's a little bit out there. I mean, really, my long-standing... my long-standing point of view that Final Fantasy VI is superior to Final Fantasy VII in every way. And I actively hunt out Final Fantasy VII defenders who really you're all woefully underprepared for my assault. And I corner you and I beat you up with facts. I just take Kefka actually winning and I like a baseball bat and I club you to death with the fact that happened. And your guy didn't really do anything but inconvenience people for a little while and killed your girlfriend.
I'm curious, is this mostly online discourse or have there been some impassioned debates among other wrestlers?
It's got to be in person. We got to sit there and I got to look you in the eye and make sure. I like to see the doubt seep into your soul as I cudgel you with the several facts of why it's a superior game.
Is this mostly like fans though, or like fellow wrestlers? Like, I guess I'm curious if you've maybe
fellow wrestlers. You know what I mean? Like, hey, fans don't need to be beat up that much.
I was gonna say, I gotta hear who's on the other end of this, debate. Like, who's going 7 more often than not? Like, what's the most heated debate you've had in that kind of regard?
I've been on the other end of this, but it hasn't been heated. It's been a crushing every time. So, I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's conquest behavior. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's funny. I just had to get the specifics. I was like, I'm sure there's like a specific wrestler where this back and forth has happened there. So you'd say you got like a 10-8 round over him, like maybe even like a TKO verbal finish, that kind of thing?
I mean, you merely made it past the handshake. I mean...
No, that's funny, man. And I mean, yeah, I'm sure I could talk to you all day if it's such an exemplary career, but I do want to be mindful of your schedule and be, cognizant of the fact you're probably a busy individual. So to that point, is there anything you maybe would like to add as a parting thought as we're kind of wrapping up here, man?
Hey, check out AEW Revolution. We're going to have a big party and be the Samoa Joe party. And it'll be on television, which I'm the king, so enjoy.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I'm getting some lads together for it, and I mean that's what I like about AEW too. I feel like it's kind of renewed that tradition of getting the lads together and watching a big pay-per-view, and yeah, very excited to do that on March 5th, and definitely excited for this TNT Championship fight between yourself and Wardlow, and yeah, looking forward to peeping that when it goes down. But until then, you have a good rest of your day there, man.
Appreciate it, man. You take care.